All right. Hopefully you've already watched the video we had for the articles of the Constitution. Again, Constitution articles set up the basis for how the federal and state governments will operate and govern the people. Now we'll move into amendments. And what we have in the first 10 amendments, but specifically the first 8 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, it's what we know as the Bill of Rights, or what you hear when people talk about the Bill of Rights. And in the Bill of Rights, we have how the governments will govern the people, or more specifically, the people's rights under that governance. And we'll talk about the amendments for a while. We can go into a lot of depth when we talk about the Bill of Rights, when we talk about the first 8 amendments. So I may have to wind up doing this in a couple of videos due to the limitations with YouTube and how much time I can break these down in. So I have to stay within like a 15-minute time frame. But first, if we look at the Bill of Rights, and we hear everybody talk about, I know my rights, I know what my rights are. Basically what you need to understand is within the Bill of Rights, within your constitutional personal rights, you have the rights as outlined in the Bill of Rights up until your rights begin to infringe upon the rights of others. Now, we'll talk about that more as we go through each of the Bill of Rights, but just say freedom of speech. You have a right of freedom of speech to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And when we go back again to why the Founding Fathers put that in, back in England, you couldn't talk bad about the king. So when we added in the Bill of Rights, we're talking about freedom of speech. It's so you can't talk bad about the government. It's also so you can talk about religion the way you want to talk about religion, the freedom of speech. And we'll talk about religion in a little bit. But when we talk about freedom of speech, remember in England they had the Church of England, and that was the King's Church. And it pretty much said what you can say or cannot say about the Bible. So you're not caught up in heresy. So you have those rights, and those rights are going to be, they don't really infringe on anybody. You can talk about the president, say you don't like the president. You can talk about governors, I don't like governors, I don't like whoever, Democrats, Republicans, whatever. You can talk about those. It's only when your speech infringes upon the rights of others, meaning you can say that. You can rent speech hall. You can rent the auditorium at South Georgia Tech and talk about whatever you want to, as long as people come in there. What you can't start doing is going out onto a public street corner and just talk about things in general that might be offensive to other people. Let's say you have anti-homosexual rhetoric you want to talk about. Well, that's great if you do it correctly and you get permits to go get a facility where people can choose to come in there and listen to whatever. So that's great. You can do that. You have the freedom to say that. Nobody's going to mess with you. What you don't have the right to do is go stand on the street corner in front of a known LGBT business and bash homosexuals where it's offensive to those people who are going into that facility. You can't do that. That's where I talk about you have the freedom of speech until that infringes upon the rights of others. And that's just one example. There's lots of examples we can think of. But just primarily think about that when we go through is freedom of speech. And it means you have the right to talk about just about anything until that right infringes upon the rights of others. And then you can still talk about it. It's just you have to move that speech into a venue where it restricts the hearing of your speech to all of those people who want to hear it. So you have a right to say whatever. Where we get confused is where we can say those things. We can only say certain things in a venue that's protected where only those people who want to hear it come in. So you have the right to say it, it's just you don't have the right to say some things everywhere. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. We have a lot of confusion today on the Second Amendment and what the Second Amendment says. And it says specifically you have the right to keep and bear arms. Now, does that mean I can have weapons and go into Kroger or Piggly Wiggly or Food Line or the movie theater or private businesses or wherever I want to with my firearm? No, not under the Constitution. The right to bear arms means you have the right to bear arms to protect your personal property. So you protect your farm. At the time it was farmland, whatever you had that was yours, you had the right to bear arms to protect that against seizure from the governments or outside parties or whatever. Now, those rights can be extended under the militia. So let's say we're back in the time when the Constitution was written, and even go back to the Revolutionary War, where we talk about Minutemen and the militia being called up that fought the Revolutionary War. If a state calls you up into their militia and says, hey, Joe, I need you to come and help defend the state, then the state's saying you have the right now to bear arms anywhere in the state in order to protect the state. Same thing goes with the federal government. And during the Revolutionary War, when the federal government called you up and said, hey, Minutemen, we need you to come help us fight the British and protect the colonies, protect what we've created, then they're giving you the right to bear your arms anywhere within the colonies, within our governance, to defend the nation. So you do have a right to bear arms to protect your own government. And where we see some confusion come in is the states have come in and said, okay, we're going to write these carry permits and we're going to allow you to carry weapons in certain venues, being you have a permit. We issue you a permit. And this again is a extra privilege the states are giving you. And you have to file for the permit and get it, and you're agreeing to carry it under the regulations given to you under that permit, but it's not really your constitutional right. Your constitutional right only covers your right on your private property. That, and again, it's like the state calling and saying, hey, I need you to help do the militia. What the state's saying is, I'm going to allow you, if you apply for this permit and it's granted, to carry a weapon in certain venues as long as you adhere to the rights we've given you under this permit. So it's not a constitutional right. It's a right given by the states for you to carry under their permit. The Constitution still only says you have a right to bear arms to protect your own property. The states are allowed to go beyond that if they want to, and that's what they do. So don't get what you're getting when you get a carry permit to extend beyond that. Remember, we talked about 4, you have it as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of the others. Well, you may have a private business owner, bars, for example, that say, I don't want you to carry a weapon into my bar. Well, they're a private business owner. They have the right to say, no, even if the state gives you a permit, this is my business. It's a private business. I allow you to come in here, but I'm not going to allow you to bring a weapon into a place where I'm going to serve you alcohol and you're going to be drinking. Sort of common sense. I wouldn't do that either if I was a bar owner, but just because the state allows you to have a carry permit, you need to read what the rights are under that carry permit, because it's not going to allow you to infringe upon the rights of others. Same thing going into, Piggly Wiggly. Why do you need to carry an AR-15 into Piggly Wiggly? You don't need to. And if you read the state carry permit and you really understand what it's telling you, it's not really giving you the right to carry an AR-15 or any other weapon into certain venues. So you need to make sure you understand what the right to bear arms means. Constitutionally, it means that you have the right to maintain weapons, and Supreme Court has just ruled that weapons are other than firearms. It means knives, sticks, whatever you consider to be a weapon. You have a right to bear arms, meaning multiple weapons, to defend your personal property. And rights beyond that are given to the states, but it still does not let you do that and infringe upon the rights of others. Got it? All right, we'll talk about this more. Third Amendment is protection against involuntary quartering of soldiers. We don't have to worry about that a whole lot anymore. It used to be really big after the Revolution when all this was going on, meaning England can't come in, seize your property, and say we're going to house people here. It means the federal government can't come to you and say, hey, we're going to seize your house and we're going to let guys from the local army base live here because we're running out of space. No, can't do that anymore. They can come and buy it. Federal government comes seize property still. They have to pay fair market value. They can't just come and take it. And they can't seize property, but they can't seize your property and force you out just to house soldiers anymore. Again, it's not that big. At the time the Constitution was written, it's huge because England had done that and taken over property all over the colonies and housed people to fight the Revolutionary War. Can't do that anymore. Fourth Amendment, protection against unreasonable search and seizures, huge in law enforcement. Remember, Matt versus Ohio is what sets the guidelines for that. If I was you, I'd look up Matt versus Ohio. It's what sets the case law. We've talked about it a little bit already. Case law. It's what the Supreme Court says that this amendment means. So read Matt versus Ohio. Be familiar with that. That's a good guidelines for search and seizure. Fifth Amendment, right to be indicted by a grand jury, protection against double jeopardy, protection against compulsory self-incrimination, protection against deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process. We'll have to go into that a little bit more. And right to just compensation when private property is taken for public use. The Fourth Amendment is huge in law enforcement. You need to read the Fourth Amendment and dissect it individually and figure out what these rights are. This is solely protection from actions garnered by the government towards you. So first of all, it talks about right to be indicted by a grand jury. What that means is if you're charged with something, I hope all of y'all, we're in college now, I hope you all know how the legal process works. You know, first of all, you have to be arrested. An arrest means nothing. All arrest means is you are charged with a crime. Before you're actually even going to go to court on that, it has to go to a grand jury. And a grand jury is where they get a large group. It's called grand because it's a large group of people that are your peers. And there's no defense in grand jury. It's all prosecution. It's basically whoever the police officer or the district attorney has to go in there and tell the grand jury, I arrested Joe. This is why I arrested Joe. This is what I think Joe did. And they give all the evidence they have at the time, and the grand jury has to decide that, yeah, we think that you probably did do this, so we're going to indict you. We've heard indictment all the time. He's been indicted. What that means is the grand jury agrees that you probably did do something and that you can go ahead and go to trial for that. So without a grand jury indictment, you're not even getting to go to trial. So there's arrest where you're charged with something. There's a grand jury indictment where they agree, the grand jury agrees with the charge, and then they send you on to trial. Double jeopardy means you can't be charged with the same thing twice. So O.J. Simpson went to trial for killing his wife. He was acquitted, meaning he was found not guilty. Even if he confesses at this point, you can never try him again because he's already been tried for it. So you can't be tried separately. Now, double jeopardy. There are circumstances in when you can be tried for the same crime, but it involves different judiciary systems. Say, for example, a person who is active military commits murder, and he goes through the state's legal process for murder and say he's acquitted. Well, the military has the right to bring that person in under the UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That's a whole separate process than our traditional legal system. It wasn't around when the Constitution was written, and people didn't really think about it. But when you join the military, it says, hey, you agree to fall under UCMJ. You give that right, basically meaning when you swear in, you're saying, I agree to the potential to double jeopardy because I agree to adhere not only to civilian law but to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And there actually is a case where a guy was tried for murder under the civilian system and was found not guilty. The military brought him back and found him guilty, and he's serving a life sentence now in a federal prison. So I'll see if I can't find that case and I'll post it for you at some point. Let's see the video on it. Basically it means you can't be tried for the same crime twice, but there are extenuating circumstances. Sometimes you can. Self-incrimination means if you're arrested, you never have to say a word. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to give evidence. Now, they can come and get warrants for you to get, for them to get certain kinds of evidence from you. So if they have a warrant saying we want a DNA sample, we want this, we want that, we want a search house, whatever, you have to adhere to a warrant. But you don't have to say anything to incriminate yourself is basically what it means, self-incrimination. Let's jump on to the Sixth Amendment. Again, solely has to do with your personal rights. Right to speedy trial, right to public criminal trial, right to a jury, right to inform the nature and the grounds of your criminal accusation, right to control and cross-examine prosecution witness, right to compulsory legal process, to compel attendance to defense witnesses, meaning if you have a defense witness, you have the right to subpoena them and make them show up to speak in your defense. They can't opt out of that. You have the right to force them to come or sit in jail until they do that. And the right to assistance of counsel, meaning everybody has the right to have a lawyer. So these are all rights. Again, read through the Sixth Amendment. These are your personal protection rights and is duly against being wrongfully charged or to prevent you from being wrongfully charged or to ensure that the process you get is constitutional. Read through those. We'll talk about those again later in detail. Seventh Amendment, you don't really have to pay attention to it. Basically what it means is you have the right to a jury trial in civil cases when the amount is over $20. So if you go into a civil case, somebody suing you for a civil case, and you may have to be out of pocket more than $20, you have the right to a jury trial. I can't imagine a case now not being over $20. It's $20 just to get a copy made of your case. So if you get charged civilly, non-criminal case, you could say, I want a jury to hear this case to make the decision. You have a right to a jury trial, civil case. Eighth Amendment, protection against excess bail, protection against excess fines, and protection against cruel and unusual punishment. Cruel and unusual punishment is kind of new, or the definition is kind of new. And there's a case, if you've taken my classes before, you know the movie I'm going to talk about. I want you to watch the movie Murder in the First with Christian Slater and Kevin Bacon. And it isn't exactly accurate in how it portrays the case, but it gives you a good idea of where we get cruel and unusual punishment, or what the definition for cruel and unusual punishment is. And I'll try to provide you a link to do that for free. If I can't, you can go to YouTube and rent it. You can go to Amazon and rent it. It's only a couple of dollars. I think it's like $2.99 to watch it. I encourage you to watch it. Again, that's where we get cruel and unusual punishment from. It's a case from Alcatraz in the 1940s. Then I suggest you go online and Google the main character in the case and find out what the reality behind it was, because again, the movie doesn't give you the exact portrayal of what happened in the case, but it gives you a good idea of why we have cruel and unusual punishment, or where that came from. I'm going to end here. I'm going to probably pick up and go into detail later in another video. May not even do it this week because I know you've had a lot thrown at you this first week. But for right now, that's going to do it for the Bill of Rights and the first 8 amendments. Have any questions, again, feel free to email me, text me, let me know what you're confused about, what you want to talk about more, and I'll be glad to do that with you. Thanks. Have a good week. Bye.